April 12, 2021, at exactly 2:17 p.m. a quiet girl named Emma Carter sat alone in a school cafeteria while three boys knocked over her lunch and laughed. But 1 minute later everything changed. A German Shepherd K9 suddenly walked in, stopped behind the Bullies, and refused to move. Within the next few hours, that same dog would uncover a hidden knife in a locker, a secret message from a fallen police officer, a stalker waiting in the parking lot, a hidden evidence box in a backyard shed, and a criminal who had been hiding for 2 years. But the most shocking truth: the entire investigation was secretly connected to Emma's father, a police officer who died in 2019, and the man responsible for everything had been watching Emma the entire time. So the question is, how did a single canine dog expose a criminal network and finish the case his partner never got to solve? Stay with us because this story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Monday, April 12, 2021. The clock on the cafeteria wall read 20:15 p.m. when the noise hit its usual peak at Maplewood Middle School in Denver, Colorado. Trays clattered against tables, sneakers squeaked across the polished floor, and laughter bounced through the room as students traded weekend stories over half-eaten sandwiches. The cafeteria smelled of warm bread, ketchup, and something fried. It was loud, ordinary, and forgettable. But in one corner the moment felt different. Emma Carter sat alone at the far end of a table. A peanut butter sandwich and an unopened milk carton rested on her tray, but she wasn't looking at them. She stared quietly at the table, brown hair loosely pulled back, a few strands falling across her cheek. Around her the cafeteria roared like a river that never stopped, yet Emma sat still inside it, almost invisible. She had learned how to disappear in crowded rooms over the last 2 years. At 12:17 p.m. 3 boys stood from a nearby table. Tyler Morrison led the way with Mason and Drew behind him, their eyes fixed on Emma. Students nearby noticed but looked away. Emma didn't see them coming. Tyler lifted her backpack from the chair, holding it up like a joke. Mason pushed her tray, tipping the milk carton onto the floor where it burst open and spread across the tiles. Laughter rose from nearby tables. Drew crouched beside the table and smirked. "Wow, Emma, your lunch is just as boring as you are." Emma stayed silent, fingers pressed against the table, waiting for it to end. At 1:18 p.m. the cafeteria door opened quietly. Officer Daniel Brooks of the Denver Police Department K9 unit walked in beside a German Shepherd named Rex. The dog scanned the room, nose twitching, ears alert. Tyler glanced up and froze. Rex moved steadily through the cafeteria until he stopped behind the 3 boys. When Tyler turned, he found the large dog standing inches away, calm but immovable. Officer Brooks stepped beside him. "Step away from the girl," he said evenly. The boys quickly backed away. By 12:20 p.m. the cafeteria had fallen silent. Rex stepped beside Emma's chair, his tail giving the smallest wag. Officer Brooks crouched gently. "Are you okay, kiddo?" Emma nodded slowly, eyes fixed on Rex with quiet recognition. She knew him. Years earlier, her father, Sergeant Michael Carter, a K9 officer, had trained Rex. In their Pine Street backyard, Rex used to race across the grass to greet her while her father smiled and said, "Dogs never leave their people behind." In 2019, Sergeant Carter never came home from a mission. Now Rex sat beside Emma again. Officer Brooks looked at the boys and said quietly, "Her father saved lives in this city. One of the best K9 officers we ever had." The room stayed silent as Rex rested beside Emma, and this time she didn't look away. By 12:31 p.m. the cafeteria had not fully recovered. The noise that had once filled every corner had settled into something lower, something careful. Students spoke in hushed voices and kept glancing toward Emma's corner and the glass door where Officer Brooks stood with Rex. The 3 boys, Tyler, Mason, and Drew, had returned to their table but sat without eating or talking, staring quietly at the floor. Rex remained beside Emma, calm and steady, his eyes slowly sweeping the cafeteria. Emma still hadn't touched her sandwich, but she wasn't staring at the table anymore. She was looking at Rex. Officer Brooks pulled a chair from a nearby table and sat across from her, not leaning over or crowding her, simply settling at her level the way experience had taught him. Folding his hands on the table, he spoke quietly. "Emma, we actually came here for a reason today." Emma looked up with the careful expression of someone used to unexpected moments. He explained that the visit had been scheduled as a routine canine safety demonstration for the school. The paperwork had been filed 2 weeks earlier. Nothing about it had been unusual until Rex walked into the cafeteria. The moment he came in, Officer Brooks said, glancing at the dog, "Found you. I didn't direct him. I didn't have to. He remembered you, Emma?" Emma said nothing. Her hand moved slowly from the table and rested lightly on Rex's head. Rex leaned into the touch without hesitation, as if the moment had happened 1,000 times before. At 12:34 p.m. everything changed again. Rex's head lifted sharply. His ears snapped forward and his body tightened, alert and focused. Emma felt the shift instantly beneath her hand. Officer Brooks stood at once. He recognized the signal. Rex had found something. The German Shepherd stepped away from Emma and moved toward the cafeteria's back hallway, nose low to the floor as if following a precise trail. Officer Brooks followed closely. Students watched silently as Rex passed between the tables and into the hallway. He stopped in front of a row of gray lockers and sat directly before locker number 47, barking once, sharp and final. Officer Brooks turned to the vice principal. "Whose locker is this?" After checking the roster, the answer came quietly. "Tyler Morrison." When the locker opened, a black backpack fell out. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a large hunting knife and 3 handwritten notes. Officer Brooks read them silently. Each carried the same message. "Today someone is going to pay." Tyler was called from the cafeteria. When he saw the open locker and the knife, his confidence vanished. His voice trembled. "I wasn't going to hurt anyone," he said. "I just wanted them to stop laughing at me too." The hallway fell silent. After a long moment, Officer Brooks said gently, "We're going to get you some help, son." He secured the knife and called for backup. Returning to the cafeteria doorway, he looked at Emma. "Your dad trained Rex to notice danger before anyone else could," he said softly. "Today, that's exactly what he did." By 12:50 p.m. the cafeteria slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed quietly. No one laughed at Emma anymore. Rex sat beside her chair while she gently scratched behind his ear, just the way she had years ago in the backyard on Pine Street, when the world had still made sense. Lunch had nearly ended when Rex moved again. One moment the German Shepherd was sitting calmly beside Emma's chair, the next he was on his feet, ears forward, nose lifting as if catching a signal no one else could sense. Emma noticed first. "He's doing it again," she said quietly. Officer Brooks let Rex lead as they left the cafeteria and entered the hallway. Rex moved with quiet purpose, weaving between students before stopping near a notice board in the corridor's common area. Beneath it, partly hidden against the wall, lay a brown paper package tied with twine. Rex sat in front of it and barked once. Officer Brooks carefully opened the package. Inside was a padded envelope containing 2 items. The first was a police badge, worn but clear. Emma immediately recognized the number. It was her father's. The second item was a folded letter with 2 words written on the front for Emma. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was unmistakably Sergeant Michael Carter's. The letter explained that if she was reading it, Rex had found her. It spoke about grief, about lonely days, and about how Rex would always find her when she needed him. Most of all, it said she had always been the reason her father kept fighting. Emma finished reading and stood still, the badge beside her. A tear slid down her cheek. Then, slowly, a small smile appeared, the first real one in years. Officer Brooks crouched beside Rex. "Good boy," he said softly. Emma knelt and hugged Rex tightly, and the dog stayed perfectly still beside her. The afternoon had grown quiet. At 20:40 p.m., Emma sat on a wooden bench in the school courtyard beneath 2 oak trees while Rex rested at her feet, chin on the concrete, eyes half closed but alert. Officer Brooks stood nearby writing notes for his report while students returned to the yard, basketballs bouncing and voices filling the air. Emma held her father's letter, reading it again carefully. At 4:03 p.m. Brooks's radio crackled. He stepped aside to listen. Emma couldn't hear the words, but his expression changed. After a moment he sat beside her. "Emma, I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm." He explained that earlier that morning someone had tried to break into her old house on Pine Street, the home where she had lived with her father. A neighbor had called police, but the intruder had disappeared before officers arrived. Nothing had been taken. The attempt looked deliberate. Emma said nothing. Then Rex suddenly lifted his head and stood, staring toward the school parking lot beyond the fence. A dark gray pickup truck sat there, the driver watching Emma with focused attention. Rex growled. Officer Brooks stepped in front of Emma and spoke into his radio. The man started the truck and sped away. Police units pursued him and stopped him a few blocks away. As he was cuffed, a photograph fell from his pocket. Sergeant Michael Carter standing beside Rex. When asked about Pine Street, the man said calmly that Carter had arrested him years ago. "And I've been waiting ever since." At 20:10 p.m. the school had been placed under a precautionary soft lockdown while officers processed the suspect and cleared the area. Emma sat in the administrative office beside the vice principal's desk, Rex lying across her feet like a warm anchor. The office smelled of printer ink and old carpet. A small clock ticked steadily on the wall while shadows of students moved beyond the frosted glass window, unaware of the events unfolding. Officer Brooks stood near the door speaking quietly with a detective. When the detective left, Brooks sat across from Emma and placed a sealed evidence folder on the desk. Officers had searched the suspect's dark gray pickup truck and found a locked metal document box. Inside were old files, photocopied reports, and papers collected over several years. Every file carried the same name stamped in bold ink: Sergeant Michael Carter. Emma watched as Brooks laid the files out one by one. Inside one folder was a hand-drawn map of Denver's warehouse district near the rail yards. 3 locations were marked in red pen. One was circled twice with a note underneath: "Find the girl, Emma." Brooks asked gently, "Do you recognize this area?" Emma studied the map. Dad worked near there. He said there were dangerous people in that part of the city, and he was getting close. Brooks placed another page beside it, a list of 14 names. 13 were crossed out. The last name at the bottom was highlighted: Victor Hale, the leader who had never been arrested. The suspect from the parking lot had been working for him. The photograph of Sergeant Carter found in the man's pocket had been a reference image. The target was not Carter, it was Emma, the only person who might know what her father had documented. Emma whispered, "The house on Pine Street." "Dad kept files there." Brooks nodded. The break-in earlier that morning had been about those records. At 2:44 p.m. another officer reported that a fake school janitor had been seen watching the office hallway. Rex instantly stood alert. Minutes later the man was arrested in a stairwell. His phone connected him to the same name, Victor Hale. Emma placed her hand on the files. "Dad didn't finish it," she said quietly. The room fell silent. Rex rested beside her feet, steady and watchful. The name Victor Hale remained highlighted on the file, waiting for the next move. At 30:05 p.m. the final bell at Maplewood Middle School rang, and the ordinary world seemed to return. Hallways filled with noise as lockers slammed, backpacks zipped, and students poured toward the exits. Outside, the parking lot filled with cars and buses under the warm light of an April afternoon. Emma stepped out through the main doors with Officer Brooks on her left and Rex on her right. For the first time since 1:17 p.m., she breathed normally again. Rex walked calmly beside her, tail moving in a slow arc, eyes still alert. They crossed the parking lot toward Brooks's cruiser when Rex suddenly stopped, his nose lowered toward a storm drain near the fence. Cars and students passed it every day without noticing anything unusual. But Rex barked once, the same sharp signal he had used earlier. Officer Brooks crouched and looked through the grate. Wedged inside the drain was a small black pouch, deliberately pushed between the metal and concrete where it wouldn't wash away. Brooks worked it loose with a pen and unzipped it. Inside was a USB flash drive, plain black with no label. "This didn't get here by accident," he said quietly. By 4:10 p.m. the drive was being examined in the Denver Police Department Digital Forensics Lab. Emma sat against the wall while Rex lay across her feet. On the screen appeared a single folder labeled Carter Case, Final. Inside were documents and one video file dated October 2019, 2 months before her father died. When the video opened, Sergeant Michael Carter appeared sitting at the kitchen table in their Pine Street home. "If you're watching this," he said calmly, "it means Rex found the drive." He explained the investigation he had been building against a man named Victor Hale, the leader of a weapons network that had never been stopped. Hale was the missing piece. Near the end, Carter looked directly into the camera. And if Emma ever sees this, I want her to know something. Every case I fought, every night I stayed at that desk, she was always the reason." The screen went black. Emma quietly knelt beside Rex and hugged him tightly, realizing the case her father started was not over. It had just begun again. At 6:20 p.m., the investigation room on the second floor of the Denver Police Department was dim and quiet. The laptop on the table still showed the paused image of Sergeant Michael Carter from the video found on the USB drive. Emma sat against the wall with Rex lying at her feet, while Officer Daniel Brooks reviewed the case files again. Across the table, Detective Solis studied documents pulled from the department archive. Every file carried the same name, Victor Hale. Brooks looked at Emma carefully. "If Victor Hale is still out there," he said gently, "then your dad's case was never really closed." Back in 2018, the K-9 unit had helped investigate a weapons smuggling network operating through Denver's warehouse district. Over 18 months of work, one name kept appearing behind every operation: Victor Hale. He had no official records, no address, and never appeared directly in any arrest. When the department finally moved in during 2019, 13 suspects were captured, but Hale had vanished just a day before the raid. 2 months later, Sergeant Carter died in the line of duty, and the investigation faded until Rex found the USB drive. Brooks searched the police database. The result appeared quickly: Victor Hale, last known activity, Maplewood area, Denver. 4 days ago, Emma sat forward. Maplewood was where she went to school. At 6:41 p.m. a call came from interrogation. The suspect arrested earlier had finally spoken. Victor Hale had recently ordered someone to locate and monitor an important witness connected to the Carter investigation. Brooks looked at Emma and spoke carefully. "Emma, I think that witness might be you." Rex stood beside her instantly, pressing his shoulder against her knee, calm and unmovable. At 7:45 p.m. a police cruiser moved slowly down Pine Street, the quiet Denver block where Emma Carter had grown up. The street looked almost unchanged: tree-lined sidewalks, faded mailboxes, and the familiar crack in the Hendersons' driveway. In the back seat, Emma sat quietly, watching the houses pass. Rex rested beside her, allowed to ride in the seat rather than the cargo area. Officer Brooks drove carefully, scanning the street with steady attention. The cruiser stopped across from Emma's old house. The porch was empty, the curtains closed, and dried leaves had gathered along the steps. It looked the same, yet lifeless. Reports from the previous December had mentioned suspicious activity nearby, but no case had been opened then. Officer Brooks and 2 officers entered using the property manager's key. The house was still and dusty. The moment they stepped inside, Rex pulled toward the backyard. Emma followed. The yard was small and overgrown. At the far end stood a wooden storage shed her father had once used for training with Rex. The door hadn't been opened in years. Rex barked sharply. Brooks opened it. Inside, beneath the smell of dust and old equipment, Rex led them to the back corner and sat. The floorboards there had been disturbed. Beneath them was a hidden metal locker. Brooks turned the dial using the factory default combination and opened it. Inside were 3 items: a laminated map of Denver marked with 11 locations, a drained handheld radio, and a stack of surveillance photographs. Brooks flipped through them until one made him pause. The photo showed Maplewood Middle School, taken from across the street. In the corner of the image, a small figure crossed the yard wearing a yellow jacket. Emma recognized it instantly. She had worn that jacket on a warm Thursday in March. Brooks's radio crackled. Possible suspect vehicle leaving Maplewood heading southwest. Back to the car. Now, Brooks ordered. Rex moved first. Whatever was coming next was already in motion. At 8:30 p.m. Highway 285 stretched westward from Denver's outer edge into the dark open country beyond the city limits, the road wide and flat in the valleys, and then rising and curving as the terrain lifted toward the foothills. The lights of the city were visible behind them in the cruiser's mirrors, a low orange glow sitting on the horizon like something left burning. Ahead, the road was darker, the overhead lights spaced further apart, the shoulder dropping away into open ground on both sides. 3 police cruisers ran in loose formation, lights flashing, sirens off, moving at speed through the thinning traffic. The suspect vehicle was ahead of them, a dark blue sedan with a broken left tail light that made it easy to track in the darkness, running hard but not erratically. The kind of driving that said the person behind the wheel was experienced and thinking rather than panicking, which made it more dangerous rather than less. Emma sat in the rear seat of Officer Brooks's cruiser with her seatbelt tight across her chest and her hands pressed flat on her thighs. Rex was beside her, upright, body oriented forward, his eyes fixed on the road ahead through the windshield, with the same locked focus he had maintained since they left Pine Street. His breathing was controlled and deep. His muscles were coiled without being tense, the particular readiness of an animal that has been trained to wait for the exact right moment and knows the exact right moment is still approaching. Officer Brooks was on the radio, coordinating with the other units, receiving updates on the vehicle's speed and position, relaying the information forward to a unit that had gotten ahead of the suspect on the parallel route. The highway began to narrow as it moved further from the city, the lanes tightening slightly, the shoulders disappearing. At 8:43 p.m. the suspect vehicle made a sudden hard right turn off the highway onto a dirt access road that ran between two fenced fields toward a low ridge in the distance. The move was not spontaneous. The turn was taken at exactly the right speed for the surface, not braking hard before the turn, not overshooting it, taking it with the practiced certainty of someone who had identified the road in advance. Officer Brooks called it into the radio and followed, the cruiser dropping off the smooth asphalt and onto the packed dirt road, headlights illuminating a pale, narrow corridor of compressed earth between dark fields on both sides. The two other units followed. The sedan ahead kicked up a dust trail that drifted sideways in the evening air, its broken tail light pulsing a single red flash in the moving cloud. After approximately a quarter-mile, the access road ended at a flat gravel turnaround bordered by a low wooden rail fence. The sedan stopped. Its engine went quiet. The dust cloud drifted forward and then dissolved. For 2 seconds nothing moved. The three cruisers came to a stop in a staggered line behind the sedan, headlights trained on the vehicle, and the officers inside held position, watching, waiting. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out. He did not run immediately. He stood beside the open door and looked at the cruisers with the measured assessment of someone taking stock of his options before committing to a decision. In the wash of the headlights his face was clearly visible. Officer Brooks looked at him through the windshield, and everything he had been building toward all afternoon snapped into place with the finality of a key turning in a lock. He recognized the face from a photograph in Sergeant Carter's file, a surveillance image taken from distance during the 2019 operation, slightly grainy but unmistakable once you had studied it. He had been studying it for the past 2 hours. He got on the radio. His voice was flat and very clear. Victor Hale, subject is on foot. All units hold position. Hale looked at the cruisers for 1 more second. Then he ran. He cleared the wooden rail fence in a single stride and hit the open ground beyond it without breaking pace, moving fast across a field of low dry grass toward the dark tree line at the far edge. He was quick, significantly quicker than most people in his age bracket. The kind of fast that comes from maintaining it deliberately, from planning for exactly this contingency. But fast on open ground in April is a specific and limited advantage. Officer Brooks was out of the cruiser and at the rear door before Hale had covered 30 yards. He pulled the door open. Rex was already moving, already at the threshold, already reading every signal his handler's body had transmitted in the past 4 seconds. Officer Brooks looked at him once. Go, Rex went. He cleared the fence without touching it, 4 paws leaving the ground and returning to it in a single arc of motion that carried him 6 feet and landed him at full stride already. He accelerated across the field with the mechanical, relentless efficiency of a pursuit animal that has done this before in full darkness and at full speed, and has never once failed to close the distance. The dry grass rushed past his sides. The wind hit his face and he used it, pulling the scent stream forward, confirming direction, eliminating uncertainty. Hale heard him coming. He glanced back once, and what moved across his face in that brief backward look was not defiance. It was the particular expression of a man who has just understood that the calculation he made was wrong. He pushed harder. Rex pushed harder. The tree line was 40 yards away when Rex's paws shifted to a different register of sound on the ground. Shorter, sharper, the sound of a closing distance, the sound of a gap becoming nothing. Hale dove left, trying to change angle. Rex adjusted without losing a stride, the correction built into the pursuit by the muscle memory of hundreds of training sessions and dozens of real operations. He hit Hale from behind and above, driving his full weight into the man's upper back, and the two of them went down hard in the dry grass in a tangle of momentum and impact that raised a small cloud of dust visible from the cruiser's headlights across the field. Hale struggled. He got one arm underneath himself and pushed. Rex adjusted his grip, holding without damaging, applying the precise pressure that said move, and the pressure increases, stay still, and it holds. Hale went still. From across the field his voice came back, rough and uneven from the fall and from the breathing. "You think Carter stopped us?" He was speaking to no one specific and everyone at once, his voice raised enough to carry, the kind of statement that is less communication than declaration. "You think one dead cop ended anything?" Officer Brooks had crossed the field at a run and arrived with two other officers behind him, and when he heard the words he said nothing immediately. He let the officers apply the cuffs. He let Rex step back and sit, his sides heaving from the sprint, his eyes still on Hale, still monitoring. Then he crouched down to Hale's level, close enough that the exchange required no volume, and said quietly, "No, one dead cop didn't end it. His 12-year-old daughter did." He stood back up and looked across the dark field toward the cruisers where Emma sat in the rear seat with the window down, the night air moving softly around her face. He couldn't tell from this distance whether she had heard the words exchanged. He suspected she had. He suspected that was the right thing. At 9:10 p.m. the city was quiet in the way that cities are quiet only late on Monday nights, when the week has barely started and the weight of it hasn't accumulated yet, when the streets carry only the people who have somewhere necessary to be rather than the people who are simply passing through. Denver's downtown was lit as always from a distance, the buildings pressing light upward into the low clouds. But the police department headquarters sat at the edge of that light rather than inside it, and the small memorial garden on its eastern side was wrapped in the particular stillness of a place designed for reflection rather than passage. It was a narrow garden, bordered on two sides by the building's stone walls and open on the others to a walkway and a low iron fence. A bench sat facing the main wall. The garden's lights were low and warm, mounted at ground level so that they illuminated upward rather than downward, lighting the stone wall from below with a soft amber glow that made the engraved names legible without making them harsh. There were 41 names on that wall, each one had a year beside it. Each one represented a complete human life reduced, by the conventions of memorial, to a name and a number, which was both insufficient and, in its way, honest, because what those names contained could not be inscribed in any space available on any wall. Emma stood in front of it. She had been standing there for 2 minutes without speaking, without moving, her eyes moving slowly down the columns of names, until they found the one she had known they would find. The one that had been added in late 2019 in the same engraved style as all the others, permanent and clear and absolutely without comfort. Sergeant Michael Carter. Rex sat beside her, close enough that his shoulder touched the outside of her knee. He was not looking at the wall. He was looking at Emma, with the focused, patient attention he always gave to the things that mattered, as if watching her was the most important work he had to do and he intended to do it properly. Officer Brooks stood 10 feet behind them, near the entrance to the garden, giving them the distance that the moment required without being far enough away to leave them alone with it. He had his hands in his jacket pockets, and his eyes pointed at a neutral space on the walkway ahead of him, the practiced courtesy of someone who knows how to be present without intruding. The evening had moved through a great deal of territory to arrive here. Victor Hale was in custody, processed and placed, his phone and his documents already en route to the digital forensics team that would spend the next weeks pulling apart the structure of everything he had spent years building. The two men arrested at the school, one from the parking lot and one from the stairwell, had been formally charged. The files from the truck, the files from the shed on Pine Street, the contents of the USB drive and the video recorded in October of 2019 on a dark wood table in a kitchen that Emma would always recognize, All of it had been received into the department's evidence chain and was already in the hands of the investigators, who would carry the case forward from here. It was not finished in the legal sense. Cases like this one took months to fully prosecute, and the network that Victor Hale had built would take longer to dismantle completely. But the center of it had been found. The man who had never been arrested, whose name had lived at the bottom of a case file for 2 years without a conclusion beside it, was no longer free. What Sergeant Michael Carter had spent 14 months building toward had been completed. Not by the department. Not by a second operation or a new investigation. By a storm drain in a school parking lot, a USB drive hidden in a place only Rex would find, and a 12-year-old girl who had sat alone at a cafeteria table at 15 p.m. on a Monday and had not known that the day was going to become something else entirely. Emma reached out and placed her palm flat against the wall. The stone was cool and slightly rough under her hand, the kind of surface that holds temperature slowly and releases it slowly, the kind that stays cool even in afternoon heat and stays warm even in evening cold. She pressed her palm fully against it, fingers spread, the way you press against something when you want the contact to be real rather than symbolic. She said it quietly, just above a whisper, the way you say something that doesn't need volume because the person you're saying it to is not at a distance. Dad. We finished it. The garden was silent. The ground, level lights held their steady amber glow against the wall. The city moved beyond the fence in its ordinary Monday night rhythms, entirely unaware. Rex pressed his nose gently against the back of Emma's free hand, once, slowly. She looked down at him and something moved through her face that was not grief, and was not relief, and was not happiness, but was something that contained the edges of all three. The particular expression of someone who has been carrying a weight for a very long time and has finally set it down in the right place. She lowered herself to the garden path and sat down on the stone, right there in front of the wall, and Rex lay down beside her with his head in her lap, heavy and warm and entirely present, the way he had been lying beside her in one form or another since she was 8 years old. Officer Brooks did not move from his spot near the entrance. He looked at the wall for a moment, at the name near the bottom of the left column, and he thought about the man who had worn that name, and the dog that had been his partner, and the daughter he had left behind, and the drive he had hidden where only Rex would find it, because he had trusted the dog with the most important message he would ever send. He thought about the fact that Sergeant Carter had planned for the possibility that Emma would need that message someday, that he had thought carefully about what she would need to hear and had recorded it with a steady voice and had sealed it in a place that only came open when the right combination of circumstances arrived, and that the first part of that combination was Rex, and the second part was Emma, which was perhaps the only combination that was ever going to work. He walked forward slowly and stopped a few feet behind Emma. He looked at the wall and then down at her. "Your dad would be proud of you," he said. His voice was quiet and not performing anything. It was just the truth, stated plainly, because that was what the moment deserved. Emma didn't look up immediately. She ran one hand slowly along Rex's back, the long steady stroke from shoulder to tail that she had been doing since she was small enough to have to reach up to do it. Then she looked at the wall again. Then she nodded, just once, small and certain. Rex lifted his head briefly from her lap and looked at the wall with her, the way he had looked at everything today with the same focused, tireless attention, ears forward, eyes clear. The German shepherd who had found a girl in a cafeteria corner, because he had never forgotten her face, who had barked at a locker and a drain and a shed door, because the scent of the truth had been there, and he had simply followed it, who had raced across a dark field at full speed because the command was given and he was ready, and that was the entirety of his decision-making process. Emma looked at him. He looked at her. Between them was everything that needed no words, everything that Sergeant Carter had trained into Rex across years of patient, deliberate work, everything that a shy girl who sat alone at lunch tables had carried quietly through the hardest years of her life. It was trust. It was recognition. It was the particular warmth of a promise finally kept. She wrapped both arms around Rex's neck and held on, and Rex stayed absolutely still, absolutely present. his breathing steady and deep against her chest. She thought about what her father had told her when she was 8 years old in the backyard on Pine Street, with the maple tree dropping its first autumn leaves and Rex sitting between them on the grass. Dogs never leave their people behind, Em. Remember that. She had remembered it through every hard day, and every empty room, and every lunch eaten alone at a corner table while the noise of other people's ordinary lives moved around her like a river she had somehow fallen out of. She had remembered it even when remembering felt like pressing on something tender, even when the memory of his voice was the hardest thing to hold. Tonight it was not tender. Tonight it was solid and certain and true, confirmed in every detail by a Monday that had started with spilled milk on a cafeteria floor and ended here, in a memorial garden, with the right name in the right place, and the case that had never been finished finally finished. Emma had come to Maplewood Middle School that morning as the quiet girl in the corner. She was leaving as the daughter of Sergeant Michael Carter. She had always been both of those things. Today, for the first time, the world had seen the second one clearly, and Rex, who had always known, had simply been waiting for the world to catch up.